Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pretty Smart Rich. I'm your host, Christina. In today's episode, I have another special guest. But guys, she was here last week and we had some technical issues, but we're going to get those fixed and we're going to get that episode back because it was just full packed of really good information and such valuable information for you guys. But we have Jo Wong here with me. Hello, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. Hello. Hi, everybody. Good to be back.
Awesome. For those of you who are maybe new and did miss the last episode, Joe is the actual Chief Revenue Officer at CommentSold, which is Pop.Store. And she's a GM of Pop.Store. So, Joe, I am so happy to have you back on here on Pretty Smart Rich. Thank you so much for coming back and joining me again to speak and talk with you one more time.
Absolutely. So happy to be back and, hope that everyone will find it insightful and love that we can have such interesting dialogues around leadership, around tech, and across different topics.
Yes, we need this. We need more women conversations and we need more women voices. So I was really happy that were like, yeah, let's do this. So thank you for joining me. All right, guys, we're going to jump right in and I'm going to start with we are going to ask Jo a little bit about her journey as a woman in tech, right? From equity, the organizations that she's worked her way through, but just like what has it been like? And has this did you go like the regular way of going to school? And did you just like, how did you create your network to meet other women in this industry and just like go from where you started to where you are now?
Yeah, I think that I always find that question really hard to answer, only because I've worn so many hats in my life and I've done so many different roles. So, like, I didn't actually realize I would end up in tech, or much less so a GM and CRO at a tech software company. So I started like, right off undergrad. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, so I went into consulting, and that really gave me the opportunity to advise and work alongside Fortune 50 companies in the US, primarily focused on consumer tech, and completely fell in love with consumer companies, consumer tech, because I love how it could relate to the day-to-day consumers, the day-to-day life, and it was so easy for me to see how products and tech could be applied to the day-to-day world. And then I ended up taking more of a different route and actually joined a fund where I actually work alongside their portfolio companies. So typically funds would invest in companies and then they'll have a team typically working on value creation. They're called the portfolio operations team, and they will work alongside their companies and work with the CEO, the board, and advise them and work with them on how to scale up their business and grow. So very much I did that role. I was a founder myself as well of an education tech company based out of Jakarta, Indonesia. That didn't really go the way I expected. It failed massively. So I did that for 2.5 years. That didn't work out. Went back into private equity, did value creation operations, had the chance to work alongside fantastic CEOs, founders, and again across consumer tech companies. So great brands like Reformation, all the way through like tech companies, tech platforms and marketplaces. And then decided to join CommentSold full time, which was one of the companies, Primera, the last fund I was on, invested in. I worked alongside the team day to day, fell in love with what they were doing, fell in love with the product, and decided to make it my full time job and switch over officially back into an operational role from my startup days. So like I said, like, if you look back and what I've done, I feel like I've done and had many, many careers in one career, going from, spanning four different type of roles. But at the heart of what I've always done is what I would think about is growth, is revenue, is go to market, and how to be really creative around your strategy and implementation. So that's really gets me excited. And, waking up and like, and something that I've learned near and dear my heart is actually, as I've navigated my career, I've been able to pick up different skill sets. So like every building block I've had, even when my startup failed, actually gave me new skill sets and enabled me to get to where I am today and be successful in every role I've had. So like while at that time, especially people always ask me that question like, oh, but it's kind of random, like what are you doing? But I think I realized that I've just been able to navigate that and make every role a success and every role an important part of my story and my career, and learn something from it. I can make my next gig always much more successful, going as a stronger leader and going as a better people manager as well.
Wow. That I want to take a step back and I want to go to when you did launch your startup. And I want to ask you when it failed, when your tech ed platform tech company failed. And in that moment, if you can go back and you can just tell us, like, what was your mindset like? Like, to be a woman in leadership like you are, and to, have worked your way through and where you are now, what was your mindset there? And why did you not let that one failure defeat you?
Yeah, I think it did in that moment. And I feel like, I call it because the company was around for like 2.5 years. I call it the death of startups around the 2 year mark. I think a lot of companies, startups actually do fail at that 2 year mark, right? Because usually founders, either didn't find product market fit, couldn't find monetization, just couldn't quite scale. And that's exactly what happened to us. I think it took me months to get to that decision, like, this is just not working out. And I kept trying to get it to work out because I didn't want to fail. I was like so worried about what do I do? It would have been my first big failure in my life. I was so nervous about how I would get judged on a resume perspective, on a career perspective. So it took me months to get to that decision, right? And it's also your baby that you spend years growing. You don't want to let go either. So when I mentally decided that, okay, like finally got there, the decision that, it's just not working, I need to call it quits. I think the main thing that was grappling my mind is the distinguishing quitting because it was the right thing to do versus feeling a failure. Because they're not necessarily the same, right? Yes, it didn't work out, right? So it failed and I left. So like I was grappling with quitting as well. I don't like the idea of quitting. So I think those two words were like looming over my head a lot. So it took me a while to kind of spin that in my own head as a positive narrative. It's like, okay, I know the reasons why I left. I know the reasons why it didn't work out. And that's why I didn't quit. It was the right thing to do. It was the right decision. Step one. Two, then realizing that, yes, it failed, but I know why it failed. And like, but I still realized that I wouldn't trade any of that experience of being a founder for anything else, actually looking back now. But I would say that, like, coming back to that, the first, I would say 6 months to a year after my startup didn't work out, I had that definitely subconsciously in my mind. I think that even then, so that was when I had switched over to private equity and went back to private equity in London. I literally could feel the imposter syndrome being worse because I was like, oh, maybe I'm not very good at my job, very eager to please, very eager to like make myself feel like I'm generating value because I'm stepping away from a scenario that didn't work well and finding myself have to justify like, did I just spend 2.5 years of my life doing nothing? And so I definitely went through a lot of it. And people don't really talk about it as much, but it definitely took me a while to build back my confidence. And now I can see that as an important part of my career, but definitely in the first 6 months or when leading up to the decision, it was truly extremely hard to not let it affect your day to day. I think it takes a lot of time, takes processing, takes you actively working on it to really go from I failed to it didn't work out. I learned a lot and it's going to make me a better person. That process actually does take quite a while.
Wow, making you a better person. I think that that's huge, making you a better person. And you were able to pivot, that's a new word after the pandemic, pivot. You were able to pivot and you were, able to not stay in a negative space. You were able to stay positive and you already knew what the statistics are for startups. So after 2 years, you made the right decision for you instead of trying to, I think sometimes founders try to turn the wheel still or turn the key, and it's like, it's not going. So I think that that was very also too self-aware of you at that age, right? I mean, I'm sure you were in your 20s. Were you pretty young?
Late 20s,
Late
late 20s.
20s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then straight from there, you went into private equity. And so private equity being not the founder side of it, but were you able to see more of the founder side from it? So for
Yeah.
founders who are coming for private equity?
Yeah, I was really lucky. So I worked at a company called Primera in London, where they basically invest in a very large range of companies, both earlier, like they're a bit more established, so they're not startups, but they still span the range of like how where they were in their journey. So I actually got a chance to work with a fantastic team at Primera and also fantastic portfolio companies where I actually got to interact with these amazing CEOs, CFO, CMOs day to day and really watch them in action, kind of work with them on strategy, implementation, how to value creation, being at all these different board meetings to like learn and see what it was like to be on the other side of the table at a board meeting, how these amazing leaders navigate such tough board conversations. So it was a really eye-opening experience. I'll definitely say sharpen a lot of what I leadership as I'm observing how all these amazing leaders think about it. So both on the Premier side as well as their portfolio companies, right? How to make decisions around operational decisions for the company. And then on the fund side, also how you think about investments, how do we assess talent, and how do you really lead teams throughout this, and how do you think about really growing companies in a very sustainable way. So it was like I said, another amazing learning experience. And I was there for like 3.5 years in London, and it was a fantastic part of my life.
That's an you lived an awesome life.
I've moved around a lot. I will say that. I have moved around a lot. Yeah.
To London, so you came back and you are now based in SF.
No, so I first moved to Los Angeles when I moved back to the States a couple years ago. And then I moved to back to New York earlier this year. But I've been with CommentSold the whole time since I moved back to the US from London. So I grew up in Singapore, but I went to school in the US and I've lived and worked here for a little bit before I moved abroad again. So yeah, so I did a couple years in LA, and then now I'm in New York.
Awesome. And so I want to ask you, Joe, I know that, you have the mindset of a leader. I want to just say that. I mean, just because just, from navigating a failure and just what you just said, not allowing it to, make you a bad, a worse person, but, instead becoming a better person because of it. That's a huge mindset that I feel like is very important in leadership. And I want to go into more of like navigating leadership in tech and in digital commerce for you as a woman. How was that, navigating the leadership part now that you knew that, the founder was not your path, but instead leadership was your, true strength, and then coming back in the digital commerce space and leading in tech.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe other people do have a perfect answer, but I don't think that I'm there yet. I think every day I learn on how to be a better leader, both in terms of making better business decisions, making better people decisions for my team, and how to show up for a team, especially when your team grows and scale, and not everybody has that face-to-face time with you. So I would say very much like I feel like I'm always learning and always trying to figure out how can I grow and become a better leader. So I don't think my journey is quite done. But when I think about navigating leadership, I do think that I personally think it is tougher for female leaders out there because finding your own voice and style is so hard and it's so challenging. I think that I've been really lucky that throughout my career, I've had a number of strong female leaders to look up to. So that to have a role model of like, oh wow, like I really like their style, or like I want to be them. And I've also had male leaders I've worked with that are generally supportive of female leaders. I've also had that pleasure of like seeing how it can mix and match to create a style that's uniquely mine. Because I think that one of the things I observed when I was like, growing and growing my career was who do I really want to be as a leader was always a bigger, broader topic because you can see like the male style, which is I'm like, I'm not that. But in the very female style, I'm like, what does that even mean? Right. So how do you really mash who you want to become? I don't think that that's a playbook really for younger women trying to become leaders. I because I don't ever want to be a man and lead like a man because I'm not a man. But then at the same time, I was like, okay, where does that lead me? Where's that line? I would say my biggest struggle day to day, and I think my team can attest to this, or even my CEO, is that for me, the biggest struggle is that how to be really firm and stern, but without being too aggressive, because I'm not naturally not a very aggressive person. So then how do I make very tough decisions and convey, be tough without losing myself? How do I, then have that translate through my communication style, something that, I'm always on a journey trying to figure out. Because it's really important for me to be authentic at work and how I lead my teams and how I am with my partners, with my, like I said, my team, my business partners, my board, everything. It's really important for me to always be me. So you don't meet me in a certain case, you're like, oh, that's so different from the Jo at work. I try to be authentically myself. So I think that is something that I would advise people to navigate and try to figure out, like, who, like, when you look back in your career, what would make you upset as a leader, right? Like that you treated people a certain way. What would make you upset? I think once you reflect on that, you use that to really navigate throughout your career as you're growing. So then you can find the right role models, you can reflect on the right difficult questions, and you can really try to assess, like, who do you want to be? What kind of clichely, what kind of legacy you want to leave behind with your team? Because at the end of the day, they will remember you. So then for you, what are you going to say when they think about Jo as a leader, as my manager?
You left some really good words right there. I mean, who do you want to be remembered as, as a leader with your team? And, as a woman, like you said, and you're getting up every day to go to your job, and it is male dominated, how do you navigate the ins and outs of being the, few women in the boardroom with it being male, male dominated or, male?
I try not to think about it, honestly. I focus on, like I try not, I mean, I think that it is jarring from an experience. I remember like the number of times in my life I've walked into like a meeting or a boardroom. It's all men in white shirt, blue shirts, and then you. And then like even when I was a founder going through networking events, always the same, right? You're the only one in the dress. Everyone is like white shirt, clichély, right? Like, I've had so many of those experiences in my life where I walk in somewhere and I'm like, wow, like, wow, like I always have a like double take. I'm like, okay, this is a lot of guys. Wow, there are no females. So I remember always having moments like that earlier on in my career where I really notice it. It's not that I don't notice it anymore. I just try not to let that get in my head, because it shouldn't change who I am and my goal and what I'm there to do. And it shouldn't change the leader I want to be. All right. It does change your communication style and how to get people on board your agenda and get them on your side or try to convince them. I think it changes communication style, but it doesn't change who I am, right? So I try to hold on to like a few things and like, okay, I need to get this through, and how can I be more effective? I don't think I'm there yet. Like I said, I'm still on a learning journey. I think everyone is. So like, but that's what I hold on to. It's like I walk in a meeting, I don't let it phase me. I think about what I want to get out of it, what I'm there to do, and why I'm so passionate about my job and why I show up every day. So I think about all that. I hold on to that, and then I cater my communication style or how I want to get my message across to the audience, which happens to be male centric. So that's how I think about it when I walk into these things. And he's like, instead of being like, oh, I try to get my headspace a bit more positive so that I don't question myself too much at those meetings.
And I loved how you said you're developing your style of communication, because it is an audience of all male, and men do listen to women, especially in leadership, way differently. Did you read any books? Did you listen to any podcasts? How did you develop that style? Or, you're still developing it, but do you read or listen to any podcasts to help you?
I think a lot of what I do is just observe people. I love observing people. So be it in a boardroom or even if you go to those like networking events and you see how like female leaders interact with people, or you see how male, you can learn from male leaders too. It's that's not related to gender necessarily. So I actually just observe a lot. I like to observe how very senior women talk, or when you watch like interviews with very successful female leaders, I like to see how they're engaging their body language, how they sit and engage with the audience. I think I learned from watching a lot more of that. I think there are like a million other books out there. I personally struggle reading just books because then I find it hard to like imagine my head. I'm like, that sounds great, but how do I actually do it? I'm also a firm believer in like career coaches. I think that like career coaches always really helpful. So having someone that you can talk to like play around with what kind of style I need to experiment. And I think the last part is actually having female leaders at the same tenure as you and being able to like talk to each other about problems and how you can then so you can like throw a problem and brainstorm with them. Oh, I tried this didn't work. Oh man, I'm struggling with this. They often have really good advice because they probably have went through something very similar. So I think like it's really about amassing that cohort of like similar stage in their career with you female leaders because you often are going through the same things, and so like they might have tried something that you haven't tried, so having that conversation would really help you as you think about how to become better at people managing and how to be better at leading a team.
That's really good. Yeah, observing high profile women is really, yeah, really, really good too. And it's interesting to see sometimes on especially social media, even the on social media, the creator economy, how there's other women who are really blowing up or becoming very like influential online through that style of learning how to communicate to other women, the leadership and everything, because it is we are looking for it. Women are looking for it because we don't know our style, we don't know our tone. If anything, it's always the negative side of the woman that we do know about. But it's never really like you said, learning how to communicate to the male audience, which is who we're working with. And so that's really good. I love that. Now, I do want to get into some real talk, Joe. And I know we've been talking real talk, but now the real talk is I want to ask you on, the acquisition side, on acquisitions and on launches of different brands and what you're seeing in the creator economy of, we know for a fact that a lot of these mega influencers are getting VC backed. So the mega influencers are VCs are investing into them. They're getting venture VC backed, they're launching their cosmetics, their merch, and it's being very successful. So ultimately it's to get acquired. But what are you seeing in the space with the influencers and the creator economy and the acquisitions?
Yeah, I think you're completely spot on. I think the top 1% of creators are becoming such big brands themselves and businesses, right? Think about like Mr. Beast, obviously the one that everyone talks about because he's really has TV shows all the way through products, physical products now, different experiences. I think you look at very successful DTC brands. You have Skims, obviously, who now also have physical outlets, but that's really helmed by, a very successful content creator, right? She's obviously more than that now, but a lot of the very successful brands we've seen and businesses are centered around a personality because that's what sells, right? If you go back to marketing 101, people identify with a brand, you sell an aspirational goal. Yes, I want to be like her. So I buy her makeup, I buy her, her food item because I want to look like her. I think previously this was always attainable if you were a celebrity, right? Then you spin off your own brand. I think the social media world has allowed very successful creators to do that for themselves as well. So you don't have to be a celebrity. You can be just a creator that is very, very popular within your own community. So I actually love that trend because I do think that it is democratizing kind of like the access to monetization across creators, right? You don't necessarily need to be several million before you can take that step. You can actually, as long as you have a very captive audience who can continue to purchase and buy from you, you can take that step. So I think that it is right. I think that in the past, when we think about big brands, it was always like Coca-Cola, your Pepsi, you think about Chipotle, that's brands, right? But now, or like even when you think about apparel brands, would be like Zara, H&M. That's what people 20 years ago considered was brands. I think now it just shifted the narrative that brands could be a person, could be centered around personality. It literally could be anything, as long as you have a community that sees the value in that brand. It could be in you, and I think that would work. I think that's why you see a lot of venture money going into creators, trying to help them build their businesses. And I think overall, that's why you see so much funding flowing to the creator world. I think it was like a really great quarter for creator economy. I think in terms of funding, in terms of fundraising, a lot of companies, a lot of new companies. I think the reason why there's so much buzz as well is because everyone is seeing this trend, right? Like creators are becoming businesses, creators are becoming SMB, like they're basically micro enterprises and they're micro businesses. So that's why you have so many different tools that are in the market now to support a creator through their journey. So in the past, when you think about when you're starting a new company as a startup, right? You had to go find the right banking solution, then the right website solution, and all that to build your business and like CRM system. The same would apply for the creator economy. So you're going to have a lot of different companies that are there to serve that population, right? From tax, because a lot of them do 1099s. That's a very different thing to manage versus regular tax. It's actually a lot more complicated than a business. So you have, from tax, financial planning, all the way through like even customer engagement tools. So there's going to be so many different tools out there really to help this up and coming wave of individuals that are becoming businesses. I think that's why it's so exciting for all of us in the space because they are going to be the backbone of a lot of the economy, the infrastructure, and how people want to buy. People want to buy from these individuals now because they trust them. So I'm very excited to see how the ecosystem shapes and take off as creators. It is the number one like vision for us as a company as well, for creators to own their audience, for creators to become business, to stand alone by themselves, right? And truly understand the power that they have behind their content and creativity.
Wow, that's really exciting. And I'm glad to hear that. And we're definitely going to have to bring you back on because this is going to continue to evolve. We're going to see more trends coming and we're hopefully we'll see more than 1%, but I mean 1% for sure right now, the influencers. And Joe, I just want to say this. I have enjoyed talking to you so much and I've gained so much, value from you here on the show. What is some advice for up and coming women leaders that you could leave with these last
Yeah.
minutes we got?
So like something I tell myself all the time, and I wish the younger me had leaned in a lot earlier on it, is just be brave. You can do it. I think often doubts creep up in our minds a lot, right? There's so many studies shown, right? Like women only apply for jobs when we hit 100% of all the criteria versus men. I think, a lot, even on the day to day, it's like, oh, should I say that? Should I speak up? Should I lean in? Or, in whatever scenarios you're in, I think just trust yourself a little bit more, give yourself a little more self-love and credit, and be brave and just do it. I know it's easier said than done, but I think that's something that I think that's the main thing I wish my younger self would know and lean in more into, right? And just trust yourself and trust the decisions you're making.
Okay, guys, you heard that. Trust the decisions that you're making and go be brave. Well, Joe, thank you so much for tuning for coming and joining me on today's episode. I just want to say I appreciate you so much, and I'm glad that you joined me again, and we'll have you back on. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Peace and love as always.